We're back here on our forum as we discuss financial services, offshore banking, commercial banking as well, and perhaps some investments in the Bahamas today. And we are pleased to have this group of young Bahamians addressing these issues. We have heard about the international agencies bringing pressure to bear on the Bahamas, Ms. Allen, and we get the feeling, gentlemen too, that we are acquiescing to the whims and fancies of these professionals in Europe in particular. What do you say to that?
Well, we're not alone,
Yes.
is what I say. If the feeling is that we're acquiescing, I think that there is part of that that's legitimate, and part of that that's not legitimate. So the part of that that's legitimate is, and everyone's said it before, the Bahamas really does need to be generally much more proactive and engaged in these international organizations. And by proactive, we mean actually doing what other jurisdictions do, sending people en masse, to Brussels, to Washington, people who are armed to talk about these issues and to negotiate. And I think that we've had some wonderful people within government who've been able to enunciate the position and negotiate, throughout the years of the Bahamas dealing in these multilateral organizations. But I think we really need to make sure that we're not on the back foot, that we're on the front foot. So that's the first thing in terms of whether we're acquiescing. The part that's not legitimate is, frankly, back to my point, that we are playing in an international field.
Yeah, but there's a view.
That this is, at the moment, this is the global standard.
Yeah, but there's a view that these multinational organizations or these international agencies, they do not want the Bahamas to be in the business of offshore banking or private banking in the Bahamas.
I think it's a legitimate view in this sense. After every financial crisis, there is a host of new tax initiatives. After 2008, look where we had, TIAs, FATCAs, CRS, BEPS. Now we're at a global corporate minimum tax. We're almost at consensus on that.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely, you get the impression that the world would rather we not exist. But I think that it is that their focus, of course, like any country, is to keep their money where they can tax it. And especially after COVID, after this pandemic, you're going to see even more initiatives, because this has created a drain on GDP, and a significant drain. They're going to want their tax revenue, and they think they know where it is. I think that sometimes they're mistaken. They often overestimate how much they can actually collect from these jurisdictions, or that's actually avoiding the tax net. But we will never get away from these initiatives. They're going to keep coming hard and fast.
Yeah, but is the Caribbean, this region in particular, are we pushing back sufficiently on these issues?
We need to cooperate.
We need to cooperate.
Absolutely.
No matter what is sent to us, we should just cooperate?
No, when I say cooperate, I think we need, as a region, we need to cooperate.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But
Go ahead.
I would only say this much, Randall. We sometimes forget that we are playing on their court,
Absolutely.
right? So we always look at it saying they don't want us to exist. Well, the reality is we went into their jurisdiction and took what was theirs, Now, we may not want to look at it in that manner, but just like you said, European banks, if they didn't have a Bahamian subsidiary, they wasn't saying anything in our vernacular. Well, the truth of the matter was, it was the way of how the European entities encouraged persons to get the monies out of the European high tax jurisdictions. We've evolved from what I'm going to say a tax-free status jurisdiction to one that should have high quality service with a competitive tax environment, and we've not evolved in that. So Leah spoke to the global minimum tax consensus. What I will say is this much: they have conflated issues purposefully. Their real issue is tax, but they've called it anti-money laundering. And so yes, when we should push back, it is saying, be honest. Now, if you're saying, we are a clean jurisdiction, AML, but you know what? You're going to do everything in your power to stop your residents from spending their tax dollars that you should have in ours, then we know we're fighting. And when we're fighting that, then it becomes, how do we add an actual product and service that is abiding by saying, well, you've set a platform that says these taxes, if this tax regime was there, then you would not be deemed anti-competitive or harmful, right? But we've not wanted to look at that side of it. We've just wanted to say, oh, well, you are the big bad guys who are picking us. But we went to play in their court. And so if we want to do that, I don't say that to be dismissive and say that we should be capitulating. I say that to say, well, we know that when we go onto a foreign court, we carry our best game. And so when we move into that jurisdiction, Aaliyah was more polite. I would say we send persons with a collect bottle into a gunfight. We need to be sending our best and brightest, which is from within the industry, in order to participate. When you go to those meetings, those aren't just government technocrats. These are their best and brightest in their own private sector that they bring to the table, and we have to match fire with fire, and we have the ability to do so. So that's what we have to be focused on. It's not saying, woe is me. We need to be saying, how do we uppercut you without you seeing it?
So we need to be proactive then?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look back retroactively, we've always been in catch-up mode, right? I think that's that's evident. But you know what? We've been very inventive and innovative. And we've been very successful in bringing new products to market, right? We have unique products in the Bahamas that we offer internationally and with high demand, right? And we're still sought after, actually because of our reputation still to this point, because we're innovative, we're flexible, right? And we have a legacy of asset protection. We have the strongest fiduciary legislation globally. We have trustees from all around the world that settle Bahamas trusts, right? And looking at this whole issue of corporate tax, we could kind of shift the angle and look at the world of investments, right? If you look at international investments and having the Bahamas as a hub for global and cross-border investments, it needs to remain tax neutral to facilitate those investments. So let's just say in an investment fund, you have investors, let's say from a dozen countries around the world. They all might have different tax rates on dividends or capital gains, but if the fund itself was taxed on the investment activity, then everyone would lose and everyone would be double taxed, you see? So if to have efficient movement of capital, you do need an element of tax neutrality, particularly when it comes to capital movement.
And we're seeing unprecedented, to just add to Brian's point, we're seeing right now unprecedented levels of permanent residency status here, like people coming here, making this their home country. Unprecedented levels. We have companies moving from Ireland, companies moving from the US and setting up shop here, not just an IBC with one staff member, wholesale moving their businesses here because of the advantages we offer, and it has to dovetail into the compliance and clean nature of our ability to bank. And we've been very good at that. And now we're starting to see the dividends come full circle.
We've lost business to Cayman and other places over the last several years. Are you suggesting now that because of these new rules that that the situation is improving in the Bahamas, where we can regain some that we've lost?
We've also taken business.
You've taken business?
Yes.
And it's very specific business that we lost, right?
Yeah.
Like there was more offshore banking that we lost. But what I'm talking about is a more broad level approach here. We're seeing various sectors start to move, businesses and principals start to move here. And we couldn't do that if we didn't have the regulatory regime we currently have in place.
And I would only say that we should not discount why Cayman had been successful in some of the other territories. It was efficiency at the time. And it was accommodative in their practices, whether it was in terms of international subject matter experts that were allowed to emigrate there in order to establish some of these elements. So immigration policy, it was their willingness to turn things around or put in place the mechanisms, legislation, as well as the service providers to turn things around in a timely manner. So some of these were policy decisions why we lost out in terms of, we speak about the captive insurance, we speak about the hedge fund environment, but the truth of the matter, when you boil each one of them down, there's very little difference now as it relates to policy. But Cayman had gotten the jump up because they decided this was their value proposition. And if you watch them now, they do everything under the sun to protect the hedge fund capital of the world, Monaco. We have to decide what our value proposition. We have a tremendous, I'm going to say, depth in terms of persons who have the skill sets in financial services, wealth management, fiduciary services, trust, and all the like. But we have to now pool those to say, well, how do we create that value proposition, that brand that it's better in the Bahamas, not just for tourism, it's better in the Bahamas for banking, financial services, wealth management, digital assets, and then go out and sell it to the world. Because if we sit back and wait for them to come, people will come to the Bahamas, and that just shows how beautiful we are, because they naturally come. But we have to be more aggressive to say, how do we go and get them here? And that's how our offshore industry emanated. That whilst it was the Europeans saying, well, where do I find a palatable jurisdiction? It trained people who then turned around to say, well, how do we aggressively continue to pursue it?
You talked about efficiency, but I read in recent times that a number of Bahamians lost jobs in the financial services sector. And it probably has to do with the profitability of the sector. There was a time when the sector was growing in terms of the number of Bahamians employed. Bahamians want to know that they are able to get jobs in this sector.
Well, I think one of the major sources for new businesses is entrepreneurship, right? You need to see some Bahamians take some ownership inside the financial services sector and drive the type of services that are actually needed here, right? If you look at the international sector over the years, of course, we're talking about international firms coming in, setting up shop, and using the jurisdiction. And yes, that has provided a lot of jobs over the years. But as we saw, when the tides changed, that proved to be unsustainable, right? Even historically, our value proposition it had to evolve over the years, right? Because things change. So what are we doing now to drive this private capital into some new financial services firms, some startups that can compete globally? That's the question. We need the right policies in place, the right initiatives that's going to allow us to allocate capital.
We don't have the policies in place. We are supposed to be a well-regulated jurisdiction. Are you suggesting that we need more legislation in order for us to accommodate what you suggested?
Yeah, I'm suggesting that we fall a little short, but I mean, you can pick up on that.
I don't know that it's a creature of legislation. I think there are a few items that we have to work on as a jurisdiction. Obviously ease of doing business.
Ease of doing business.
And also not just the experience, because yes, I can get something through different agencies, but also transparency of process, which we do a poor job of in the Bahamas. So, for instance, I was talking to someone, I won't name the jurisdiction, but they said, oh, it takes just as long to get that specific license in that jurisdiction as it does in the Bahamas. Do you know the difference? Their process is exceedingly clear, and I could do it myself. I don't have to retain you to go negotiate, drive up somewhere and sweet talk someone. We really need to get a handle on really just having transparent processes, and I think that's one of the things. I think the other thing is that, to Brian's point, the business has changed. The asset volumes have changed. We are not Europe anymore, and that went away very quickly. And so we're building up sort of new markets, and the speed of attracting new markets, unfortunately, is not the speed at which we sort of lost the old ones or had to sort of, offshoot the old ones. It takes a lot of groundwork to build relationships in these markets, to attract the business. We need to have the environment to keep it. And so I mean, that's my view. I don't know that we need more legislation. We certainly need transparent processes and efficient processes.
Okay, let's take a break. But when we return, I want the commercial bankers to talk about this ease of doing business. And there are a whole lot of people who are listening and watching who would want us to talk about access to capital in the Bahamas as well. We take this break and we'll come right back.